I'm Madison Heim, here with school board candidate
Aaron Dunn.
and I will be asking him questions for the upcoming election. What experiences or skills have prepared you to serve as a school board member?
Well, I think the most important experience I've had is I'm just finishing my second term on the board, so that'll be 6 years on the school board. Um, as someone who's not in education, coming in and learning how a school board operates and how funding works, it's very complicated. It takes a long time to kind of understand it and get a handle of it. So you can make some smart decisions for short term and long term. So I think that experience has really helped me be a better school board member. And then in my day to day, in seeing patients in a clinic, I do a lot of like problem solving and listening. And I think those skills have been helpful as well.
What is your vision for education in the community?
Well, I mean, the vision is to really make Mineral Point a center of excellence for education uh, in this area. So we want to be strong academically in all extracurriculars. We want this to be a place where every student, no matter what their interests are, or skill set, or abilities, can feel like they belong here and that there's something that's for them here at Mineral Point. So I think we're making some good progress there, but that's my vision for the school district.
One of the biggest issues facing future school boards is funding, both from the state and local level. Districts are required to ask voters through referendums to obtain additional funding for operating expenses. How would you justify the need for additional funds to operate or maintain our district?
Well, it's a ongoing issue with school funding, right? Because um, we have a limit on how much we can spend every year that's set by the state every year. And so um, we can only spend up to that limit unless we ask the local taxpayers for more. And, as you know, inflation's been a big issue, especially the last couple years. So salaries are going up, health insurance is going up, fuel costs for buses, keeping the lights on, paying for food, all those things keep going up. And yet our limit to spend stays the same. And it's going to increase a little bit this year, which helps a little bit, but it's not helping enough for really most districts in the area. So if we want to keep Mineral Point, at the top of the rankings, like we are academically, athletically, and other extracurriculars, we got to find ways to support that financially.
With the discussion around referendum, if the board has to start making hard decisions regarding budget cuts, what will be an area you would focus on first and why?
Well, I think the best way to answer that is the last thing we want to cut are things that will affect the kids in the classroom, right? Um, we want to make sure that the students maintain, an excellent learning environment and have what they need to learn. So we'll focus on things outside of that. A lot of times it means, maybe not upgrading every computer this year, or maybe not changing an old boiler this year and maybe trying to get another year or two out of it. Um, there are some adjustments we can make to salary benefits in terms of how much we pay for health insurance versus the employee. Those kind of things we can adjust over time. And also, every time a staff member retires or resigns, we always ask ourselves, do we need to rehire to replace this position, or can we fill it internally with current staff? We always ask that question so we can find cost savings that way.
What do you feel is the biggest challenge facing the district?
I think without a doubt, it's the funding issue that we've just been talking about. It's such a unique situation compared to running other businesses because we have this spending limit that's set by the state. And we're so reliant on that and how much aid we're getting from the state. And it really puts a lot of pressure on districts to go to the taxpayers, hopefully as little as possible, as infrequently as possible, to help us maintain the current services we provide. So that's a constant struggle, and we're always trying to be creative in ways to um, be prudent and sustainable with how we fund the district.
How do you feel the board can best support the superintendent and work together to move the district forward?
You know, the board's job is to supervise the superintendent, make sure they're doing a good job, right? And I think the best thing we can do to help the superintendent is really be clear in our expectations, you know? So we've been working really hard the last few years to try to clarify what are our goals, what's our vision for the district, and what are our specific expectations for the superintendent. And if we can clarify those, share those with the superintendent, then let them go use what they've been trained to do to implement that in the operations of the district. So trying to be clear and transparent, um, I think is the most helpful way to do it.
Do you believe principals should have autonomy to run their own school building?
Well, I think that just to extend what we talked about, the school board kind of sets the overall goals of the district, kind of the 30,000-foot view. And then it's really the job of the superintendent to implement those goals, set those goals, and set out plans to achieve those goals at every building level. And the building principal's job is to, take those actions for their own building and implement those. So I think, we need to empower those principals to use what they've been, what they've been trained to do to run their school building as best they see fit. All the while, it's not complete autonomy, right? Because they're supervised by the superintendent, who is then supervised by the school board.
What is the role of schools in teaching children about topics such as sex education, cyber safety, AIDS, wellness, and bullying?
Well, I think the job of a school district is to prepare kids for the world outside of school, right? And life after high school, right? And all of those things are part of that. So I think schools play a really large role in all of those issues you talked about. I think the key is just making sure that the curriculum is appropriate, up to date, evidence based, and consistent with the goals and core values of the district and the community.
What will you do to help ensure that MP retains the outstanding educators we already have and continues to hire equally talented staff going forward?
It's definitely an important priority of ours as a school board to continue to make Mineral Point a destination for teachers and staff. As we all know, there's been a nationwide teacher shortage, and Wisconsin is no exception to that. So we're very aware that as teachers retire or change jobs, that it's going to be a struggle to uh, uh, win those candidates and convince them to come here and not other places. So, we have a great public relations that helps us be strong on social media. We have a strong school website. We're in the process of making a recruitment video to just show what a great place Mineral Point is and make people want to come here. And then I think we also need to be able to compensate staff at a fair market value so they know that if they come here, they're going to be able to make something similar to what they would make elsewhere.
Do you have anything else you would like to share?
Well, it's been fun being on the school board, even though, it was rocky navigating COVID, obviously. But I think we're in a really good place right now. We've made a lot of good changes on how the board works well together. We've been doing more work in committees. We've been setting some expectations for ourselves in terms of how to behave and how to be prepared for each meeting. And I think that's set a strong foundation going forward. It's just really been an honor and a pleasure to be able to serve the community in this way by being part of the school district. It's been a great place for my 3 daughters to go to school, and I'll be forever grateful for that. And this is just a small thing I can do to give back.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm here with school board candidate
Rachael Bergstrom.
I will be asking her questions for the upcoming election. What experiences or skills have prepared you to serve as a school board member?
Great question. I think I have some formal experiences and skills in the education system. I've been in the education system for 23 years. I started as a teacher and eventually worked at a central office and at a regional agency here at CISA 3 for a while and at our Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. I currently still work in education, and I think there's some technical skills that come with that in terms of understanding not only the amount of complicated and complex things that educators have to deal with every day, but also some of the policy and the financial implications and laws and regulations, things like that. I also am a mom. My husband and I have a second grader and a fifth grader here. We moved to Mineral Point before we had kids, and now we're excited that they're in the elementary. So I think being a mom gives me a little bit of experience as well.
What is your vision for education in the community?
I think my vision aligns with the vision that we have stated, that we're getting kids in our community ready for a big future and a big world. Change, the pace of change in our culture and in our economy is faster than maybe humans are meant to absorb. I'm not sure, but things are changing really quickly, and we have to understand what that change might look like in a future that we can't predict. And I think being able to let kids be themselves and find their strengths and support them and hold them accountable and all those things are all important at the same time. So I think my vision is thriving kids who are thriving and communities who are thriving, and and kids are a big part of that.
One of the biggest issues facing future school board is funding, both from state and local level. Districts are required to ask voters through referendums in order to obtain additional funds to operate or maintain our districts.
Yeah, funding. First of all, I think it's important to just name the fact that there are legislative things outside of our control, including how schools are funding. And I won't go into the very technical weeds of how funding works in Wisconsin, but essentially the amount of funding we have access to is very restricted, especially over the last 20 years. And if you look at inflation rates and just the last 15 years of funding that hasn't been available to school districts, it's not surprising to me that in our CISA there are 31 districts. 27 of us will be going to referendum in the next couple of cycles. And that's not reckless spending. I think part of the problem in understanding what the challenges in finances is just that it's such a complicated formula. So maybe your taxes go up and you're like, well, that's going directly to the school. Not necessarily. So there's just a lot at play, and it's really hard to understand. So I think one of the things that's the most important is that the school board and the district continues to be really, really intentional about every dollar they spend, how they spend it, etc.
So how would you justify referendum spending?
I think the reality is, with the budget shortfalls that are inevitable that we're facing, it's a matter of justifying the local community's desire to maintain and keep our schools running. At this point, I've been on the school board for a year so far, and I feel really confident that we're pretty scrupulous about funding. We made some hard decisions. We're doing things like moving, and the district leadership is really thinking about how do we save money on contracts? Can we put things up for bid and save a little here and save a little there, and et cetera? And I think at this point that it's not a matter of there's no more fat to cut out of the budget. It's a matter of actually being able to function. And we know that the high school building is going to eventually need, there's boilers and there are things that we can see in a long-term maintenance plan that we're going to have to tend to. And the justification is just a matter of financial fact that if we want to keep our schools, and I know I do, I think we all do, they're a really important part of our community overall, we're going to have to make an investment. And that's what the legislation has set us up to do. If communities want schools, then they're going to have to put the bill for most of them.
With the discussion around referendum, if the board has to start making hard decisions regarding budget cuts, what will be an area you would focus on first, and why?
I think the first place to focus is to continue looking at really specific cost expenditures. Where are there efficiencies we can find? For example, we just took the lunch program back in-house. We used to subcontract that out and have a company do it. We saved $30,000 by doing that. So that's some money that we can put back into the budget. The next thing that I would look at is things that eventually, that might be obsolete or that might not be actually that needed. So asking teachers, what do you not need? Did you know we had this license for an online program? Do you actually use it? Do you need it? Does it align to the instructional materials, etc.? I think the last things that I would ever cut are staff and extracurriculars or activities that kids can, like those activities and staff are the things that are a school. So we can look at everything around that first, and then the absolute last thing would be activities and staff.
What do you feel is the biggest challenge facing the school district?
I think it's adapting to a rapidly changing economy and world with an impossibly restricted budget.
How do you feel the board can best support the superintendent and work together to move the district forward?
I think there's a balance of being in partnership and holding each other accountable. So I think the district itself has a lot of rules and regulations and requirements and a lot of different things happening. And I think the board has to maintain a set of norms and a way of working together where our focus is really intently on outcomes students are getting, fiscal responsibility, making sure maintenance is happening. So there's a balance there of partnership and accountability that I think is works really well when it works well, and I think that's important.
Do you believe the principal should have autonomy to run their own school building?
In terms of, autonomy kind of means free reign to do whatever you want. That's not a reality for any principal. I think with all of the responsibilities and again the requirements, the things you have to do as a principal leader, and full autonomy is not possible. However, I do think that principals are hired in buildings to use their judgment, their professional judgment. They have to make, just like teachers do, they have to make thousands of decisions every day. And we entrust them to use their professional judgment and to listen and to pay attention and be responsive to staff and students and parents in a way that's professional and also aligned with the district vision and student outcome goals and things like that. And so I fully entrust them to be able to use their judgment in that way. To say they should fully run their building, I just don't think it's reality. I mean, yes, they make a lot of decisions all the time, and that's what we ask them to do. But there are so many factors going into leading a school building that it's really hard to say that they can be fully autonomous.
What is the role of schools in teaching children about topics such as sex education, cyber safety, AIDS, wellness, and bullying?
I think that's a long list of topics, and I think to start the first filter on like what the school's role is it required? Like there are certain curricular things that are required. Sex education was the first one on your list. I think that isn't necessarily required. Schools can teach it. I think one of the places that shows up the most is in like optimum health curriculum and things like that. And there is a responsibility we have to teach medically accurate optimal health growth in our schools. I think their cybersecurity feels like a natural. I do think that there's a layer of cybersecurity education that developmentally appropriately, I should say, that happens when if you're working on something that requires internet access, if you're working on something that like is asking for your name or some information, I do think there's a responsibility we have in those tasks when those tasks happen to be able to make sure kids know what cybersecurity means and what it looks like and how to stay safe online. It's part of our world now.
What will you do to help ensure that MP retains the outstanding educators we already have and continue to hire equally talented staff going forward?
I think making sure that, listening to the staff, we had one meeting so far with staff representatives, just pay attention and say, why do you stay here? Why do you like it here? What's good? What would you like to improve? How are some things? Because, when you're making decisions with just a budget, it's hard to understand what the implications are in a classroom or in a day-to-day setting, or it's hard to know what challenges teachers are facing if you don't ask. So I think part of it is listening to staff. I think part of it is continuing to do what we're doing. We attract amazing teachers, especially for a small community, and we definitely need and want to keep them. And I think part of that is also our community. Like there are reasons people want to live here, and we have to keep those reasons alive too. So I guess those are the main things. I mean, I would love it if we could get a windfall of money and pay everyone more. I don't think that's realistic right now. That's not a reason that we shouldn't try to figure that out. We did just pass a small increase because there was extra funding in the budget. Again, it gets complicated because of the way school budgets are set up. You can't it's not like your personal savings account where you can accumulate it and then spend it down on whatever you want, unfortunately. So again, I think pay matters. People need to be able to pay their bills and take their kids to the doctor and take care of their health and all of that. But so does the culture that you work in and the community that you work in.
Do you have anything else you would like to share?
I think I'm really proud to be a member of this school district. I'm excited about what's possible. I'm hopeful about the things that will come to our community. I'm proud of the fact that we attract a lot of families for open enrollment, which means people see what you all are doing in school and what our teachers are doing and what our community brings. And I think that's important.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
My name is Matthew Ginninen, and next we will be doing an interview with Justin Skelding. Our first question: what experiences or skills have prepared you to serve as a school board member?
Sure. So I'm in my third year right now on the school board, and it's been, an amazing journey. Starting out very green in my first year, but we put a lot of work into looking at how we operate as a board and what we can do better, and what are our development opportunities. And I think we're starting to see that in how we interact as a board, the goals that we're setting in place, the resources we're looking to implement at the school to support our kids and make sure that they're getting the best education possible. And I would say in addition to that, the continuous improvement experience I have in my professional life, using data, leading people, I feel like I have what it takes to take on the responsibility and opportunity to run again.
All right, our next question: what is your vision for education in the community?
I would say my vision is we are a financially sound school system that is setting up our kids to be future leaders, whether that's going to college, whether that's going into the trades, just setting up our kids to be successful in whatever they want to do with their life. And I think a lot of that starts with, a focus on, the curriculums in our school, making sure the kids are, one, learning to read and then reading to learn as they grow through elementary school, through middle school and high school. And I also want to, challenge us to push us forward on, be honest or kind of look at our brutal facts where we need to improve. And yeah, I think just continue to push the district forward and be the best that we can be, and continue to educate the kids and give them the education my wife got here. I wasn't born here, but I know she got a great education, and I think we see it in the GPAs of like yourselves and others in the high school, and so it's just an exciting time to be on the board.
All right. Our next question is that one of the biggest issues facing future school boards is funding, both from state and local levels. Districts are required to ask voters through referendums to obtain additional funding for operating expenses. How would you justify the need for additional funds to operate or maintain our district?
Yeah, great question. And, it's something we heard from every Wisconsin school district at the school board conference in January. So we're not alone in this fight. Everybody's finances are going to get tight. But that starts with, understanding where we are and where we're projecting to be in, the revenue and the cost side of the equation. And with that and what that data shows, and like we actually just got a new tool to help us really forecast further out into the future and look at areas or years where we might need a referendum. And then that starts with being transparent with the community and say, here's what the fiscal situation looks like. Here's what we've done to remedy it. Here's what we think the potential, investment from the community would be and what that gets us, and frame it in a way that, helps us maintain the staff, the buildings, our educational levels and curriculums. And, we just kind of have dialogue and get feedback from the community who are our stakeholders. And say, hey, this is a situation we're in. We're not the only ones that are in it. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff we would want to have in a referendum, but like, what are the base things we need to have to continue to move forward?
With the discussion around referendum, if the board has to start making decisions regarding budget cuts, what would be an area you would focus on first and why?
Hard question to answer, but I think, we'd have to look at what doesn't impact the kids. And I think there's a lot of things that, you know, would impact them that people might not realize, but I think it's just really going line by line on our expenses and understanding, it could be like, holding off another year on uniforms. It could be, maybe cutting back a field trip. I mean, I know that impacts kids and field trips are learning, but I think, as long as we're not cutting in a way that impacts how the kids are getting taught in the classroom and, the outcomes, that's where we got to start. But to me, it just goes line by line and having a transparent, open discussion around, you know, we might need to get to X dollar amount and go through line by line how we could get there.
What do you feel is the biggest challenge that the district currently faces?
Um, I think there's a couple. It's like, the looming fiscal situation. Um, I think we're in a situation right now that, a referendum could be a potential 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So not as soon as we had initially thought, which is a good thing. We'll just have to keep our eyes on that and continue to be transparent and look at, where we're spending our money, but also setting up the school or putting our school in a position where more and more kids want to come here. So we're getting that additional revenue from the state. I think the other challenge we have is, some of the test scores in the middle school around reading and the data showing that, we need a reading interventionist. And, we just approved getting a resource in place to help those kids that are in need because the data is showing that we really need some help there. And so we're excited to get that in place and watch to see what that does to the reading assessment scores and help those kids.
How do you feel the board can best support the superintendent and work together to move the district forward?
I think it starts as like a culture of we. It's not us against the board. It's not the superintendent against the board. It's, while the superintendent isn't a voting member on the board, we're all, we should all be marching in the same fashion or towards the same vision. We're not going to agree on every single thing, just like each board member doesn't agree on every single thing, but we will support what makes the most sense for the district, even if it's something we voted no against. And it starts with like building the proper relationships with the superintendent too. It's not this adversarial relationship. It's got to be a partnership where, both sides get pluses and deltas, I'll call them. But if we're aligned to a shared vision and a set of goals and, putting the kids and the community first, I think that leads to the best relationship.
Do you believe that principals should have autonomy to run their own school buildings?
I do, and I think we're getting better at setting the expectation with the principals and holding them to a standard where we want to understand their vision, and then what data they're measuring to make sure they're on track to meet their vision. But no, I totally agree that, those building level leaders have the autonomy to set a vision, run with it. We're there for support and to bounce questions off of. But as leaders, I think we expect them to own their business, I'll call it, and we're there for support and oversight, obviously. But yeah, I totally support that.
What is the role of schools in teaching children about topics such as sex education, cybersecurity, AIDS, wellness, and bullying?
I mean, I personally, I think those are all relevant topics to teach our kids, to set them up to be, future adults. So I don't really see those as kind of being, taboo or anything. Um, I just think we are incumbent to teach those topics and also get their thoughts and feedback on bowling and challenges they're encountering, day in and day out at the school, because the board isn't, we're not administrators, we're not there every day, so we need their feedback, but I don't see any issue with those topics being discussed.
And our final question today is, what will you do to help ensure that Mineral Point retains the outstanding educators we already have and continues to hire equally talented staff as we move forward?
No, great question, and that's one of our three goals as the board. As the teachers are paramount to the outcomes that we've seen in the past and we continue to see right now with our kids. So it's understanding where they need help, in terms of resources, just kind of being an open door and letting them come to us, build those relationships. We've already set up some uh, forums where we have teacher representatives that come and talk to the board about various topics. But we're there to support. We're going to hold them to high standards so that our kids are being set up for future success. But we'll teachers again are paramount, and we're going to be there to support them as best we can.
All right. Well, that was the final question. So thank you for taking your time to speak with me today and find time in your schedule.
All right. Thanks, Matt.